When it finally shows, it doesn't start where people think. It doesn't begin with success. It begins with separation. Not visible at first, not obvious, just small differences in position, in timing, in access. Two people doing similar work, but getting different outcomes. One starts to move slightly ahead. The other stays where they are. At first, it doesn't look like much. No major results, no dramatic shift. Just subtle divergence. Because the early returns of unseen work are not results. They are positioning. Where you stand begins to change. What you see earlier, what you understand sooner, what you're able to act on before others. These shifts are small, but they matter. Because timing is not random, it is a function of where you are. And unseen days move you. Not externally at first, but internally. How you think, how you respond, how quickly you recognize patterns. So when something appears, you're not reacting. You're already aligned, already prepared. This is the first return. Not money, not status. Clarity. You start seeing things before they become obvious. And that changes your actions. Slightly. You move earlier. You decide faster. You hesitate less. Not because you're guessing, but because you've already processed it. That processing was built during unseen days. Repetition without reward. Effort without confirmation. So when others are trying to understand, you're already acting. And that creates distance. Not dramatic, but enough. Enough to separate outcomes over time. Because small advantages compound. Not in one moment. Across many. And most people don't notice this phase because it doesn't look like success. It looks like nothing. Just slight differences. But those differences are the beginning of everything that follows. The separation doesn't announce itself. It builds in a way that feels insignificant. Small differences in timing, small differences in decision, small differences in what you notice and what you ignore. And because the differences are small, they are easy to dismiss. You don't feel ahead. You don't look different. So from the outside, nothing has changed. You're still in the same place, same environment, same people, same conditions. But internally, the structure is different. The way you process information, the way you respond to pressure, the speed at which you recognize patterns. That's where the shift is happening. And it starts affecting decisions. Not the big ones, the small ones. When to act, when to wait, what to ignore, what to commit to. Most people don't realize how much these decisions matter, because each one feels minor. But minor decisions control direction. And direction, repeated over time, creates distance. Distance most people can't explain. Two people start in the same position. One begins to move slightly differently. Not faster, not harder, different. And that difference comes from unseen days, from the way repetition reshaped perception, the way silence forced deeper processing. So when a situation appears, they don't react the same way. One hesitates, the other recognizes. One waits for confirmation, the other acts before it's obvious. And that timing creates advantage. Not dramatic advantage, just enough to move first, just enough to position slightly ahead. And once you move first, the environment responds differently. You encounter less resistance, less competition, because most people are still processing what you've already acted on. And by the time they move, the position is already taken. This is how separation accelerates, not through effort alone, through timing. And timing is not luck. It's preparation meeting visibility. Preparation that was built before anything appeared. That's why unseen days matter, not because they immediately produce results, but because they change how you interact with opportunity. You stop chasing it. You start recognizing it earlier than others. And recognition is what creates access. Not effort alone, but the ability to see what others don't see yet. That's the second layer. Unseen work doesn't just build capacity, it builds awareness. And awareness is what begins to separate outcomes. Long before results appear. If this message resonates with you, like and subscribe for more content like this. This channel is built for people who are done waiting. At a certain point, the difference stops being subtle, not visually, functionally. Because once positioning begins to shift, the environment starts responding differently, not to your effort, to your placement. You enter situations earlier, before they become obvious, before they become crowded, and that changes everything. Less resistance, less competition, more control over decisions. Not because you're better, but because you're earlier. And earlier is one of the most powerful advantages there is. Because most people don't operate early. They operate when something becomes visible, when it's confirmed, when it's safe, when it's already moving. And by then, the structure is set. Positions are taken. Opportunities are distributed. Momentum is already assigned. So they enter late. And late always feels harder. More competition, more friction, less room to move. Not because the system changed, but because their timing did. This is where the gap begins to widen. Not through effort differences, through access differences. One person is interacting with opportunity before it expands. The other is interacting with it after it becomes obvious. And those are not the same environments. Early environments are quiet, less noise, less attention, less competition. Late environments are crowded, more noise, more reaction, more people trying to extract value from the same moment. And that compresses outcomes. Because too many people are acting at the same time, so even if the effort is equal, the result is not. Because one person is early and one is late. This is where unseen days convert, not into immediate results, but into timing advantage. You begin to see shifts before they expand, patterns before they become obvious, movement before it becomes crowded. And that allows you to act with less resistance, less hesitation, less pressure, because you're not competing yet. You're positioning, and positioning happens before competition. That's the shift. You stop reacting to what exists and start aligning with what is forming. And most people never operate there because they never stayed long enough to develop the awareness required to see it. So they remain in reactive environments, competing late, acting late, moving when it's already obvious, and wondering why it feels harder, when in reality, they're just arriving after the advantage is gone, after the space has filled, after the structure has already formed. And this is where most people misunderstand it. They think the outcome comes from effort alone. More hours, more intensity, more visible work. But effort without direction just creates fatigue, not separation, not advantage. Because if the timing is wrong, the environment absorbs your effort. You push, but nothing moves. And over time, that creates doubt. It starts to feel like nothing is working, like the effort isn't translating. But the issue isn't effort, it's alignment, where that effort is being applied. Most people apply effort after things are already active, after opportunities are visible, after attention has already formed, which means they're entering crowded space, where movement is restricted, where outcomes are compressed. So even if they work hard, they're working inside limitations, inside an environment that's already saturated. And that's why it feels like effort isn't enough, because in that environment, it isn't. But when effort is applied early, before visibility, before competition, it behaves differently. It expands. There's more room to move, more room to shape outcomes, less friction, less noise, less interference, because the environment hasn't filled yet. It hasn't reacted yet. So the same effort produces a different result, not because it's stronger, but because it's placed differently. That's the part no one sees. They see the result later, but they don't see where the effort was applied. They don't see that it happened before anything was obvious, before anyone was paying attention, before it looked valuable. And that's why it feels invisible, because it didn't exist in a visible environment. It existed in silence, in repetition, in low feedback conditions, where nothing confirms you're on the right path. And that's where most people stop, not because they can't continue, but because nothing is reinforcing them. No recognition, no visible progress, no external signal. Just effort, without immediate return. So they shift, they wait, they move toward what already looks active, and by doing that, they enter late, into environments where the advantage is already gone, where effort has less impact. And that's the cycle. Leave early environments too soon and spend your time competing late, while the ones who stayed continue building in silence, until that silence turns into separation. By the time it becomes visible, it's already decided. Not in that moment, long before it. What you're seeing is not the start of success. It's the surface of something that has already formed. Quietly. Position has already shifted. Timing has already aligned. Access has already changed. So when it appears, it looks sudden. It looks like a moment, a breakthrough. But it isn't. It's a release of everything that was built when nothing was visible. All those early decisions, the ones that didn't feel important, the ones that didn't feel like they mattered, they accumulated. Not externally, structurally. They changed how you see, how you respond, how you move through opportunity, before it became obvious. And that's why the outcome is different. Not because you worked harder, but because you were earlier. Earlier in perception, earlier in action, earlier in positioning. And once that compounds, it separates outcomes permanently, because you're no longer reacting to the same environment. You're operating ahead of it, before it fills, before it becomes crowded, before it becomes obvious. And that's where the advantage exists, not in effort alone, but in when and where that effort is applied. Most people never see this because they only recognize outcomes, not the positioning that created them. They see success, but not the unseen days that placed it, not the timing that shaped it. So they try to replicate the result without understanding the structure. And it doesn't work, because the structure was built before it was visible, in silence, in repetition, in decisions that looked insignificant at the time, but changed everything later. That's the difference. Success is not built in the moment it appears. It is built in how you positioned yourself when nothing was showing yet. Like the video, subscribe,